Hello and welcome. This is Wilson Ruiz. I'm the producer-director of Global Cities, an international television series which documents the impact of immigration on the globalization process. Here in the US, in 1960, only 1/8 of the population increase was due to immigration. In 2001, over 1/3 of it. Whether because of the plight of refugees, the need for cheap foreign labor, or the very nature of its immigration policy, the US is facing demographic problems that make for volatile, dangerous new political disputes. To examine the issues surrounding the immigration debate, I've come to New York City, which is the gateway to the United States as far as immigration is concerned. You will hear from ethnic leaders, politicians, and immigration experts. Let's begin with former New Jersey U.S. Senator Bill Bradley.
The untold story of America is that since 1965, we've had a new wave of immigrants that have enriched the diversity of our country just as previous waves have done. And they came for many reasons. Some of them did come to go to work for companies. Some of them came because they fled oppression. Some of them came because they wanted the experience of the culture. Some of them came because they wanted to have a better life for their children.
Well, most immigrants to the United States are admitted as immigrants not on the basis of a need for labor or a need for skills, but rather simply because they have family connections to U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents, former immigrants to the United States. There's no numerical limit on such admissions for immediate family of U.S. citizens. So as naturalization takes place, newly naturalized citizens petition for the admission of their family members, and you get flows that have nothing to do with labor or need for labor.
The concern that many people have, and one that I have, is the large number of illegal immigrants. As I told you earlier, we have over 500,000 illegal immigrants in the metropolitan New York City area. And that, to me, is wrong. It should not be. Because what you have is people who are following the rules, coming in and doing the things that are required, and others are just violating the law and coming in, being smuggled in however they get here, with visas that are forged and all kinds of things.
Debates over immigration issues in the developed world are creating explosive political crises in many countries. Here in the US, huge new waves of immigrants, considered too spicy for the American melting pot, are altering its social texture and changing the face of America. Ms. McHugh, I've been told by many New Yorkers that the new wave of immigrants, people who arrived in the 80s and 90s, are really changing the face of New York City. Do you think this is true?
Well, absolutely. I think you can't be 2/3 of the city and not have changed the, changed everything from obviously the complexion of the city, right on down to its, its base of businesses and jobs, its culture, its education institutions. So certainly, I think that this is fundamentally changing New York, and in ways that most New Yorkers embrace and believe have really breathed new life into the city. You know, if you look around the United States, there are a lot of cities that are really on the decline and are trying to figure out how to get more immigrants.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of urban centers in America that 20 years ago were thought to be dead, they're alive, and they're alive because of immigrants. And if you look at the cities where there have been few immigrants, they've moved very little. If you look at the cities where there have been a lot of immigrants, you have whole new subcultures that add to the dynamism and economic activity and ultimate prosperity of that community.
Ms. Deshaies, there seems to be a lot of interaction among the different ethnic groups that occupy what I call the cultural middle ground here in New York City. Are these groups creating their own cultural space?
They do. they do create their own space. They do, come together. If you'll find pockets of people living, almost like in isolation at times. But it's like a 9 to 5. When they're 9 to 5 at work, they are American. But when they go home, it's like going home and eating your own traditional food and having your own circle of friends from back home, and you spend your weekends at the religious institutions. But you also learn to, acculturate is probably the word, or learn to be American during the hours that you need to be American, and operate very productively, but at the same time maintain your identity and your culture.
Mr. Liu, is it possible in New York City to be bilingual and bicultural?
Absolutely. And I would think that as we get further along into the future, people would become furthermore multilingual and multicultural. You look at I am Asian American. I have always been Asian American, and I'm proud to be. I have retained many aspects of my Asian culture, and I am fully immersed in American pop culture. So I'm very fortunate to have that. I think as our schools become much more integrated, and as our residential areas, basically the fabric of New York City becomes much more integrated, people will become, whether they like it or not, multilingual and multicultural.